exploded. Like, he could have just left and said, have a good day. He exploded. He like yells at my dad's place of business to F you to people, and yells all sorts of stuff and leaves. And my dad comes home shocked. He'd never been so embarrassed in his life, he says. And he had no idea what happened. And I could see it all happening. My dad, him and I are both kind of instigators. I can see exactly how this played out in my head. I'm like, Chappie should have done it, but you shouldn't have done what you were doing. I didn't say that to him yet. But I sort of talked with Chappie. I told him he needed to apologize to my dad because it was wildly inappropriate, whether what my dad did was right or not. And I guess they buried the hatchet that night. But then a couple nights later, when my oldest brother was in town, him and Chappie got in a big fight. And my dad calls me the next day and he says, Carl, we really could have used you there last night. So that shows what I am in the family. I'm the person who's supposed to keep everybody calm.
Being reasonable and calm.
It was funny because my oldest brother Frank, he had me and my other brother Lee on the phone a few days earlier, and he's like, guys, there's an X factor in this week, and it's Chappie. And Chappie's a hothead, but Frank's a hothead too. He says, whatever Chappie does, whatever annoys you about Chappie, just smile, say that's nice, Chappie, and go along. Frank breaks the rule his very first night there.
Okay.
And this is definitely a pattern. I'm always the one that has to put my brother's arguments back, not just Chappie's, but all of their arguments, and fix them.
I wonder what would happen.
In our adult life, anyway.
Okay. I would wonder what would happen if you didn't play that role.
Well, I did when him and Frank got in a big fight. I wasn't there.
But they called you and said, hey, we sure could have used you.
My dad did, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I had no idea what had happened.
But when you are present, you're sort of, I mean, do you just naturally kind of go into that role, or is it sort of expected, Carl, come here and mediate? Or
I'm typically the least anxious if something happens, is I think why they see me in that role. I'm almost always the last person to really get fired up in those situations. And so I think that's more why they see me in that role. They don't call on me to mediate. It sort of just ends up happening.
Well, I'm just curious. I mean, I think this would be a great laboratory and learning experiment, because Bowen theory would suggest remaining the calm and the less anxious, but also communicating to the other side. I think you can solve your own problems.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, the more effort. Here's the theory: the more effort you put into yourself and becoming self-differentiated, you also give the space for the other person to work on themselves as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, staying connected, staying less anxious, but saying, you know, if your advisor, you're being asked to come help or whatever, you know, I trust that you guys can figure this out on your own.
Yeah.
Maybe they can't, but you know, the effort to...
I think for the most part they can one-on-one.
Okay.
When it's more than one-on-one, like 2-on-1 or 3-on-1, it gets muddier.
Sure.
That'd be a good way to put that.
So how can you stay in contact with your father and your brothers, you being one-on-one with each of them, and but not getting into their dynamic with each other?
I mean, usually there's not a dynamic. Till we're all in the same room once every 2 years.
Okay. So you know what's going to happen again
It's not something that is an every week occurrence.
Christmas 2019.
Yeah. So it's not something that happens often enough to where I'm that worried about changing how it is right now, because it really doesn't take anything out of me. If we all lived close together and we were all together a whole bunch, then it would probably be something I'd be a lot more interested in fixing right away.
But what if you were less interested in fixing it? That's my
Yeah.
That's my question for you and your efforts at self-differentiation. What if you became less interested in fixing it?
I guess everything would be fine.
Yeah, it might be. Might be a little intolerable for a little while, but eventually I think it would work out.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's the theory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At least that's the theory. Yeah, so, you know, it's really interesting, and I've seen it work, that the less interest I take in helping a person with their problems and encourage them that they have the resources and skills to solve their own problems, the better off it is for both of us. But it's also really interesting to go into those family situations and just observe the patterns that are going on there, and recognizing, oh yeah, that pattern is pretty ancient in our family. I mean, it goes back generations, and then see something else goes, oh, well, there's something new. You know, just being able to observe how people are relating to you, relating to each other, and you know, whether you and your brothers, when you're in the same room, all of a sudden just go back like you were when you were 12 years old or something like that. You know, how long does it take for you to return to that space when you're with your family and your brothers? You know, it usually doesn't take me too long to return to 12 years old when I'm with my sisters when we're all together. But you know, I try to be a little bit better about it. No.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's just real interesting. I just think it's endlessly fascinating watching relationships and watching people either struggle or get really good at relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I don't know. It's just my thing, I guess.
Yeah.
But you know, it's always interesting to, when you are in those family situations and in the moment observing the patterns of behavior, and just note those same patterns and how they might or might not be replicated in you and your relationships in your ministry and with your family and in your peer group or any of those kinds of things. You know, it was interesting. You were somewhat of the peacemaker in your family of origin, but then when I revisited the community group time, which was the one at mid-unit, looking at that video, and your perception with Heather, and then risking, I guess, it not being entirely peaceful when you said, "I don't believe you." You know, that seemed like, okay, I mean, at least that's a different behavior that Carl has undertaken there, and which I think was really important to the dynamic with Heather, and was able to get her into another frame of mind. So kudos to you for doing that. Yeah, but I just wondered what you were aware of in that moment for yourself and what you were trying to do. I was looking at the video and it's just, you were just aching to say something. I could just see it in your face.
Boy, that was a while back.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just that she kept saying, and it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, she did.
Like, she said it enough to where it's like, is it though? So that was sort of just wondering.
Okay.
I don't think I was consciously trying to rock the boat at that moment or anything like that. She could have just said it's fine and kept going. No, it really is fine. I wasn't really trying to.
Were you aware that it was a different role for you?
I don't know that I was.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I don't know that I was really aware that I was trying to do something different at the moment. Maybe I was. I'd have to think more about that.
Okay.
There's areas where I can see my trying to do things differently. In the SPRC meeting, the Pastor Parish Relation Committee meeting the other week, where I mentioned it in number 3 on the group learning process. I sat through a meeting where some people are really happy with my performance and some people are unhappy with my performance. Really, it just comes down to one particular couple being unhappy with my performance, which is fine at this point.
Is this the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I sort of talked in that meeting about, because we're supposed to talk about gifts and graces that the church has or that the pastor has or things that the pastor wants to work on over the next year. And in that meeting I brought up the fact that I've been doing too much and that I wasn't going to do as much in the coming year. And then I amended the phrase by saying, at least at Welltown. I've done too much at Welltown. And that particular person who's an Old Bethel member said, yeah, that's right, because you don't do anything here. We do all the stuff here. Okay. So, sorry, attendance is up 26% in the last year, and we made money this year for the first time in 8 years. Sorry about that. I didn't say that, but that might be what I was thinking. I was non-reactive still. But most people in the meeting were very affirming of that feeling that I was having. Or they were very affirming of the fact that, yeah, Carl probably does do too much and it's probably not good long-term sort of thing. And I mentioned that I think the churches have underfunctioned because I've done this. And I said that there in that meeting, and then I said it again this past week in the administrative council meeting. And that was and I said, I'm going to do less, and it might be stressful for a little while because people feel like stuff's not getting done, and stuff probably won't be getting done, but it'll end up getting taken care of in the course of time. And most people everybody, as far as I understand it, the last meeting anyway, was happy with that, what I said.
Do you think it in some way they were feeling empowered?
Maybe. Maybe they're saying, we'll see if Carl really can not do that.
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of put yourself out there as what you said. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this.
Yeah. Maybe some of them are thinking, we'll see if Carl really can not do that. Okay. Because, I mean, even after we had that meeting, I'm working on putting together a schedule, and I was this close to February 11th being first thing in the morning. We're having Pancake Sunday. we'll do service and have pancakes at the same exact time. Then after service at Old Bethel, having an administrative council meeting, leaving from that administrative council meeting, having youth group, finishing youth group, and having a long-term planning committee meeting, the first one of the year. And I really thought hard about whether I wanted to do that or not.
There's that 55 hours in one day kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, for me, the reason I would have done that is so I didn't have to come back into work on a Sunday after church another week. I prefer to stack stuff up like that, but I decided to split it up, and so the 28th we're doing some stuff, and then the 11th we're doing some different stuff. So I did decide to split it up, which was good.
What do you hope might happen with it splitting up? What do you think the difference to you would be?
I think it's less anxiety producing to Katie and Wesley.
Okay.
Or at least to Katie, and in turn it'll end up being less anxiety producing for me. I told Katie that, and I could just feel her like, are you serious? Are you kidding me? Sort of feeling. And even after I tried to explain why I wanted to do that, she was not a fan. And so I didn't, which was probably the wise decision. It was a wise decision to make, just not to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's significant awareness and learning, of being able to take into other people's thoughts and concerns and feelings, and I imagine that was an important important awareness and important moment for at least the two of you.
Yeah. So I have gone so far as to sort of tell people at church about my not doing too much in the coming year. And I'm working to, and I've also said I'm sort of working to empower leaders. Yesterday's, it was, I don't know if y'all are following the same Old Testament as we are right now. It was 1 Samuel in our texts. Talking about
Eli and Samuel.
Yeah. And I think I preached a sermon for myself instead of for the congregation, really. Because I preached on Eli's side. We don't really think about Eli's call that much. And his call in this particular case was, he probably heard God saying you need to do less. And hand over the reins to somebody finally, because you failed doing it last time you had a chance. And so in that I see part of leadership is finding ways to give yourself less control at times. So I've been working on that for myself a little bit more, and thinking about that.
I'm just curious. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to do this, but I was just curious if you have presented any of this effort to your congregations in Bowen language or
I haven't.
thoughts.
I haven't at this moment. When I explained that I was overworking, I used sort of overperforming and underperforming language. I didn't say it was Bowen theory language, but that's the sort of language I did explain it in, and I think they understood that, and it made sense to them. And I said I've worked hard, hoping that more people would work harder, and obviously it's done the opposite. And they're like, well, yeah, I guess so, because that's been something we've been having questions about for the last 6 months, especially at Welltown. Volunteership is down. It seems. Everything's down except giving. So when giving's up, you can hide a lot of shortfalls from a lot of people, but not from the pastor. If the pastor's being honest with himself. But giving's up, so it's easier to for everybody not to be really anxious about it right now, which might be a big blessing for me to be able to try and fix it while things are good. Because they have far more than they need right now at that church, which is the opposite of when I got there.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Yeah. Well, I think we've about reached our hour time. Anything else you wanted to
No, I think we're good.
talk about? Okay.
Lots of stuff to talk about. Go Jaguars. Go Vikings. If those two teams are in the Super Bowl, I'll be very happy because it means the Reds